Hello, my name is Joshua Hodgson, and I wanted to share with you a theory that I've been developing for the past 2 years. The goal of this theory is to reconcile Einsteinian relativity with modern quantum mechanics. There are a few fundamental flaws that I have noticed with Einsteinian relativity, special to be exact. The flaws are that it is assumed that time and space are integrated together as singular units, and that the speed of light is a constant, a velocity held at 186,000 miles per second that cannot be broken. When I first developed this theory, I was very curious about what the behavior of an object would be if its kinetic energy was reduced to absolute zero, removing it of all kinetic energy. For this object, relatively speaking, the differences in kinetic energy that must be exchanged during physical interactions, transitioning between kinetic and potential states, would result in a differential of infinite energy. Also, for all objects that are decelerating, it will take them an infinite amount of time to reach this state, a state of matter in which they possess zero kinetic energy. This theory assumes a major flaw in modern physics in regards to the Planck length, the assumption that there may be a maximum or minimum meaningful distance of interaction for all things in the universe is assumed to be false. It is entirely relative, dependent upon how much information the observer is exposed to given a certain amount of time, and that you can essentially go all the way down into atoms, into quantum particles, below the so-called Planck length, and things will continue to happen indefinitely. And the same would be going out into a maximum view. So taken as a whole, the universe would appear to be nothing more than a singularity, where all distances are equal to each other and all energies are infinite. Now, obviously, this is not the universe that we seem to exist in, so it is natural to assume that the theories that currently hold in modern physics are true because they describe our universe fairly well for the way that we experience it. But it would seem that there are other things that may cause this effect, and that this is not a solid thing. It could totally change how much we are exposed to. But I feel like I'm going off on a tangent, so I'm going to bring it back to the theory. The reason that these audacious assumptions are made is because of the fact that under this theory, light should be moving at infinite velocity. Now, if we go back to when I was pondering what would happen if an object were to be decelerated down to a state of zero kinetic energy, we can assume that this object, with an inability to properly interact with any matter around it, would also not be able to interact with gravitational forces, and thus would be considered a massless object. Now, if it were able to interact or exist in a kinetic universe, this object that has zero kinetic energy, then it would possess instantaneously an infinite amount of kinetic energy. And there it would assume infinite velocity. Infinite velocity, of course, though, would not be an object moving. Rather, it would be an object that exists in every possible place that it could, spatially speaking. It would be connected to every point indefinitely all throughout the universe. It's picturing infinite velocity is similar to asking the ridiculous question of how fast does one end of a bridge move to the other end. I mean, that's, like I said, it's ridiculous. They are connected to each other. That would be an infinite velocity. Things that are one and the same continuously throughout space. But if this were possible, then that would mean that the universe and this object would exist as a singularity, because anything that is infinite, that is able to be expressed in our finite universe, would result in a singularity. A singularity would be a place where everything is of the same energy density, everything spatially is exactly the same, and it's all condensed into an infinitely small point, but it doesn't matter because size is entirely relative and all the same. So just about everything is irrelevant in a singularity, except infinite energy. That is the only thing that it is, really. Infinite energy and infinite probability, possibility for everything that ever could be and will be. Now I was thinking to myself, what kind of a thing could possess zero mass, zero kinetic energy, and travel at infinite velocities? I thought that this could be light, but I knew that light didn't travel at an infinite velocity. Its velocity in a vacuum is 186,000 miles per second. But then again, nothing could reach that speed, and I was wondering if this was the crux of the issue. We can never perceive light moving because we're always behind it, as if it's a horizon line. It's all around us, but we can only view it from afar, from behind it, from within this sub-photonic velocity. And I was wondering if its actual speed was nothing more than an illusion, because considering that it would take an infinite amount of energy to reach the speed of light, it seemed perfectly reasonable that an infinite amount of energy would result in an infinite velocity, but clearly we see that here in our universe an infinite amount of energy does not result in an infinite velocity. Perhaps it is possible that the infinite velocity cannot be viewed as infinite because we would have to exist in a singular state to experience that. So there must be some threshold causing us to experience light at the velocity that it's traveling, whereas its true velocity is infinity, so we can never actually reach it. As if it was all an illusion. But what would be the cause of this illusion? I have determined that the cause of this illusion is time. I've determined that the cause of this illusion is time. The integration of time results in change, and the ability to differentiate between two things, or anything to exist and defined as something, means that changes must be observable and quantifiable as information in the universe. And in order for this to happen, we must not be able to perceive, or the information cannot interact with itself in a singular state. It must not be aware of itself. It must not be, it must be in a kinetic state. So this kinetic state that we perceive our universe in is a limited restrictor that is caused by time, but this restriction is only illusion. And so it is time that causes us to be able to perceive the speed of light at what it is. It kind of behaves as a velocity asymptote. I guess in mathematical terms is the first thing that popped in my mind. Something that could not be reached, that we can approach forever and would take an infinite time to reach, but exist always just beyond our grasp. This is exactly how light behaves. So I've determined that an object that has zero kinetic energy, something that is antikinetic, behaves exactly as light does, and that we could not exist in a universe where we perceive change, because if we perceived it as its true form, antikinetic, we would perceive the universe as a singularity, which wouldn't be perception at all, because perception relies upon change, and change relies upon time. So it is time itself that interludes itself into our universe, into our perception, and into the information that we perceive that is our universe, that causes these phenomenons to happen, that causes light to travel at the pace that it does, and that is the reason that an infinite amount of energy is demanded for it. But that doesn't mean that that is the true velocity of light. The true velocity of light is a singularity. The true velocity of light is infinite, and anything with infinite velocities exist everywhere simultaneously throughout the universe, resulting in a singularity. But the singularity possesses no change. No change is no perception. So for the universe to exist in the way it does is entirely dependent upon its perception. And this perception is built upon the fundamental roots of time. So the behavior of time and what it does for us results in our experience of the universe and why this limitation of the velocity of light exists. But the true form of light is an antikinetic object. The true form of light is an antikinetic object that spans the entire universe. This theory is called Antikinetics, and my hope is that it is able to reconcile modern physics with the reality of our universe.